X-Yachts of Denmark has long been famous for its sailboats. High quality, high performance sailboats like these. What it's less well known for is its power boats, but it does have one, and it has one here at the Palmer Boat Show. Now, we've previously seen this boat, the X-Power 33C. We've seen this with inboard propulsion. Here at the Palmer Boat Show, they've got it with twin outboards, top-rated twin outboards. And it's interesting, particularly because of the hull. Now, the hull is called a peat step hull. I first saw that on a Yamarin more than a decade ago up in Finland, where it didn't actually perform that well, but it did have merits in terms of its concept. Now, it's changed over the years, but the principles remain the same. And I've got a lovely little model here to compensate for the fact that the boat's in the water and you can't actually see the hull. So we're going to have a little chat about that. Now, the basic idea is the spray rails on a regular planing boat tend to be relatively flat and they fling the water sideways. The idea with this trio of spray rails here is the angle they come off the hull at throws that spray downwards and aft, which apparently creates a high pressure zone beneath the hull and softens your impact underway, as well as making it a little bit quieter and a little bit more user-friendly. So it'll be very interesting when we get this boat out on the water to see exactly how it performs. Well, I've been pretty excited to try this boat. We've heard all sorts of things about that peat step hull, about how it softens the ride, about how it's a little bit quieter, a little bit more efficient, also a little bit more stable. I mean, basically, the manufacturers of the peat step hull suggest that it improves your boating experience, the performance dynamics in pretty much every regard. And we got the top rig here, twin 250s, so this ought to be quite entertaining. So let's just trim her in and get her up to speed and see how she does. There's plenty of poke right from the start. I'd say we're planing in around about 4 seconds. If I push on through, we're passing 30 knots in about 10. A bit more trim. Passing 40 knots in about 20 seconds. Trim her in again and give her a little turn to port. There's certainly no absence of grip there, and we're coming over some little swells here, and I kind of see what they mean as I'm going over these things and coming back down. You do hear not just an impact from fiberglass on water, you do hear a kind of graduated re-entry, with the sound of water against water. It does feel remarkably soft. Let's get her up to the top end. We're expecting round about, yeah, nice. We're expecting round about 42, 43 knots from this. And true to their word, that's exactly what we're seeing, around about 43 knots. What's really interesting about this boat and this hull and the way it seems to work though is in terms of the running efficiency. Now if I ease her back to around about 20 knots, well, there's 48 litres per hour disappearing there. That's 2.4 litres per nautical mile. And that's perfectly good, though not exceptional. There's nothing exceptional about that with twin 250s on the transom. If I push on, that peat step hull, those aggressive spray rails, they really seem to kick in. We get to around about 36 knots, which is a very fast cruise for a 43 knot boat. We get to 36 knots and 108 litres per nautical per hour. That's 3 litres per nautical mile at 36 knots. I have to say, there's loads of hope, loads of controllability, loads of fun to be had when you throw her into a turn. and really decent efficiency. So in all regards, I'd have to say that the guys behind the Pete Step hull are pretty much accurate in all regards. It's very impressive indeed. Now, it's not the quietest boat in the world, certainly. I mean, at that lovely cruising sweet spot of 36 knots, that fast cruise, you are incurring about 90 decibels, but that's what you get when you've got a big long wraparound screen and a deep, safe family cockpit and a pair of juicy outboard engines on the transom. There's not a lot you can do about that. Yeah, I have to say, sceptical though I was about the concept of the Pete Step hull, particularly having tried it a long while ago on that original Yamarin, I have to say, the guys have absolutely nailed it with this. Now, as I say, twin 250s is the top option. You can also have a twin rig of 200 horsepower motors, or you can go for a single rig for the same kind of price as the inboard version. The inboard version, a single Yanmar 320 to 370. If you go for a single outboard, that's either 350 as standard or a 400 horsepower option too. But this back end is actually quite impressive in its own right. We have these little partitions here enable you to get across from one swim platform to the other, and also to trim these Mercury engines out with their little four peaks on the front edge of that cowling. If we move over here, there's a telescopic ladder built into this port platform. So we also have this bar recessed into the deck, so you can grab that as you're climbing out without creating a trip hazard. But we also have, this is an option, or an option that the man specifically requested who owns this boat. This enables you to use an additional upright to pull yourself out of the water. And with its heritage actually in sailboats, many of which are relatively highly customised, X-Yachts is quite open to suggestions like that. We also have the gas locker positioned way aft, out of harm's way. On the starboard side, we have the transom shower and shore power. Now, as you stand back here and look at the way they've designed this boat, you can see that virtually the entire beam is encompassed by that internal cockpit. That means it doesn't immediately show you any obvious way in, but if you see here in the centre, we actually have a hinged seat back, and if we push that straight over, that falls down into place. It gives you very easy access from this swim platform up and over and into the cockpit itself. And we have to mind our heads, of course, because we do have the aft sunshade erected. That just slides straight out from the back end of that hardtop. Gives us shelter in this fierce Palmer sun. And when we're in here, aside from feeling really quite high spec, the one thing that really strikes you is how unusual this layout is. It feels very much, in fact, like a limousine tender for a super yacht, with ranks of seats facing each other across a central companionway. There's easily space here for the full ship's company of 8 people to face them each other across there. And we also have infill, so you can put a cushion across there and have a C-shaped seating section aft with a table that drops down into the space and can convert into a sunbed. If you like though, because of course this is a Danish boat and sometimes it gets a bit chilly up there, you can fix canvases to the aft end of that hardtop. They come straight down to these boarding points amidships and cocoons off this forward section, so you can also have a table that's fitted in here, so you can enjoy nice sheltered warm dining when the weather turns. So that's a handy touch, and so is this. This little control panel basically enables you to take charge of everything of relevance back here in the cockpit. So we have the T-top lights, we have the cockpit lights, we also have the bimini controls, the table up and down if you spec it with that table, and this little button here for opening the what would have been the engine bay hatch. And we'll do that right now actually. We'll open it up because it's quite an interesting part of the boat. When you take an inboard powered boat and equip it with outboards, more often than not, when you open up this hatch, what you tend to see is stringers. You go right down into the bilges of the boat. You see old cabling and brackets for filters and so on. So it's not very user friendly. Here, however, they have lined it quite beautifully. Down in here, there's plenty of space for these infill cushions. And if I just unclip one of them and manhandle that a little bit, you'll see that it's actually backed with a carbon fibre backing. Makes it quite rigid, but still very lightweight. It's very easy to manhandle. And they fit very neatly in that slot there. Further aft, we have a little hatch with access to your pumps for those outboards. And if we look forward, this little hatch here gives you access to your fuel tank, which on this boat, because it's the outboard powered boat, has been upgraded from a 400 litre model to a 600 litre unit. Let's climb back out of there and take a look at some of the other features around this boat. As I say, a great many of which feel very high end. What's nice here is the fact you can open and close this hatch relatively quickly at the push of a button without having to remove any of these cushions. There's absolutely no fuss. And the storage spaces are similarly impressive. So we have a nice big space below here, and in order to access that, come over here and hit one of these buttons that unlocks it, and then you simply lift it up on nice strong rams. I'm mistaken, of course, that is the 600 litre fuel tank. That is storage on the inboard model, not so here. If I hit the middle button and lift this one up, there we are. That's a vast area of storage. What we also have here is a couple of slide out fridges beneath the helm seats, and if I remove those, you'll see we have a single gas burner, some very high-end taps at that relatively shallow but fairly generous sink, and more of these buttons to open up these spaces here. The joinery is actually very good. Here we've got a couple of power points for your coffee maker and so on, and if we open up the one on the starboard side, you get a better sense of the quality of the work here. And this arguably is a transferred feature from the world of high quality sailing boats. Some proper attention to detail in that. This is not just off the shelf IKEA stuff that's been adapted for a boat. It's an entirely different level to that. Moving forward into the helm position, well, this is very deep set. I mean, in all honesty, that screen goes way aft anyway, so the vast bulk of this cockpit space feels very secure and family friendly. When we move forward into this helm position though, things are really rather lovely. Both these seats have fore and aft adjustment, plus bolsters, plus fold down armrests in a nice kind of fibrous, wipe clean, weatherproof material. And if I sit in this space, you'll see we have an additional armrest, twin throttles and the bow thruster there, plus easy access to the optional joystick with skyhook feature. It costs an extra 20,000 or so, but it's well worth it for a lot of buyers. If we step across to the third seat on the port side, just across that companionway, well, this guy over here is equally well looked after. Beautiful seat again, lovely armrest times two. We also have a little foot brace, and what I really like is the fact that in addition to getting the chance to be the DJ, the guy over here also gets a little vent to warm his toes. And on this particular boat, spec'd by the owner, we also have demisters right the way around that windscreen, so when you put those canvas covers up and the weather's not so good, you can actually see where you're going. Now, before we go down into that cabin and see what we've got down there, let's just take a little look at these side decks and move forward to the bow, because as I say, things feel very high spec. And what's interesting here particularly is the fact that we've got quite wide side decks. So while the aft end uses pretty much the full beam, this forward part of the cockpit is actually relatively narrow compared to the beam of the boat. And this is basically inherited from Hawk. This is basically the Hawk 33 adapted and modified and upgraded in accordance with X-Yachts' way of doing things. But this element of the boat remains the same. On the future models from X-Yachts, the 40 and 45, we'll be seeing more conventional walk-around layout, I think. But as we move forward, you can of course spec this space with sun loungers. Now, I can personally attest that Flexitique heats up to fierce levels under the hot Mediterranean sun, but it's worth the pain because this anchor is actually quite a treat. Now, of course, X-Yachts is quite proud of the way this boat looks and it doesn't want to spoil the lines. So as an optional extra, you get an anchor set up like this with a little hatch on the forward part of that stem, so the stem itself stays nice and pretty. And to operate that, all you do, I'll get the camera in position so you can see it in action, is hit that, out goes that hatch, and the anchor can drop on those struts without damaging your bow. It's a very simple and effective way to do it, and an option a lot of buyers of a boat like this are likely to take, I would have thought. Again, lovely finishing, lovely fixtures and fittings. No expense spared there. And as we make our way aft, this time down the port side on those big wide side decks, it's interesting to note that actually the hardtop's even wider than that. So you are kind of levered out a little, and there's no grab rail, just a kind of moulding that you get your fingers behind. So it's not the safest feeling side deck given its scale, but it's perfectly serviceable. Now let's pop down below and take a look at this cabin. Now the first thing to note is they are compact steps. So you need to go down backwards, go down bum first. I'll do exactly that. Once you're in here though, the scale of the place is pretty impressive. Every spare inch is used for that bed. You could easily get a man of 6'4" in there, no problem at all. Reading lights at this end, decent views, plus the hatch up above. And this finish here, this is pale oak, an oak faced ply. Quite highly polished here. Apparently, according to X-Yachts, they think that the sailing fraternity like relatively modest matte finishes, and powerboaters, being according to them a little bit more blingy, will enjoy this gloss finish. Well, that's not me. I'd go for the matte finish any day, but it's certainly a very Nordic feeling space. Modest materials, plenty of light, feels quite pared back and modern. And underneath the bed we have some really good size storage spaces. This hatch is hinged, so you don't have to manhandle it. It's also quite lightweight, so there's no trapping of fingers. Further forward we have the bow thruster plus an extra bit of space. Now it would be good to see X-Yachts treat these two spaces with the same degree of respect they did the vacated inboard engine space aft, with dedicated trays and liners so you can store things in there properly without feeling like it's a bit of a compromise. But what I really do like is behind here. Now let's hit this button to turn those lights on so we can see properly. Again, it's a very, very clean, bright fit out. I'll step straight in there and perch myself down on that loo. From here, there's plenty of headroom, plenty of light, and this is a very cool feature. If we hit this button and just wait a second, just like that, as if by magic, you can see the horizon. And if you're doing something you don't want anyone to see, there we are, frosted. Again, lovely calibre of fit out here. Just a very, very practical space with a pull-out shower fitting, and of course a deck drain down below. It's very attractive as wet rooms go. Well, the X-Power 33 is now safely berthed alongside its sailboat siblings. So what are you to make of the overall package of this new boat? Well, at €328,000 for the base package, it's certainly not cheap. It's really quite a premium price. But then when you're on board, it certainly feels like a premium powerboat. You can see it inherits a lot of the quality from its established sailboat siblings. It also inherits elements of the design from the Hock 33 upon which it is based, but it's a seriously interesting boat. That cockpit layout is brilliant for families, and when you get it out on the water, that peat step hull does absolutely everything they claim for it, all of which comes together to make this, despite the price, one of the most compelling powerboats here at the Palma Boat Show.